Good afternoon. So I was going to say it's Sunday, it's actually Monday. But I actually wanted to come on here and film a video today talking about signs and symptoms that your period is coming, that your blood is coming, that whatever you call it is arriving. And the reason I wanted to do this is because I think that my period is about to come. And I have this feeling of really not wanting to be seen, but I also think that I'm in my crone energy and just in terms of like the phases. And it actually makes the most sense that this is when I would create and this is when I would share information from one woman, from one person who has a period to another, because this is when we have all the wisdom, and this is when all the lessons have really been gathered up. And I think when we want to hide is probably when we should come out the shadows. So I'm here today. I'm showing up. I've been wearing a lot of purple. It's just been a color that I really felt drawn to. And I'm just going to share with you guys the signs that I've noticed within myself, because these are just things that I think, because I experience them, I don't think I'm the only one. And I think that we actually end up finding more valuable information and sharing our personal experiences rather than just what might be the overarching like communal experiences, because I feel like you find rich detail in the personal. So I made a little list. I made this just this morning as I was eating my breakfast. I'll say for one thing I've really been craving, and even hearing the sound of my own voice, I'm like, ugh, I like kind of want to shudder, because I've been craving a lot of like silence and just like sitting there and being isolated and being like in a dark cave, but I want the cave to be warm. But there's like a little bit of suffering that I've been craving, which is kind of interesting. But I'm just going to go through the list because I think it'll help me think more clearly. And I would really love to know what your experiences are and what your signs are. I asked my roommate this morning if she said if she could tell when her period is coming. She said she usually knows afterwards, like what the signs were, but it's usually after. And that's what it's usually been like for me. And I think that the reason that is because we don't really get to have a lot of conversations amongst each other. There's not really like meeting spaces for all of us to come and talk about our experiences, specifically focused around these types of experiences like periods and your cycle as a whole. All of those spaces are usually online and they're still pretty new. And it's not like we're in touch with a lot of like mothers and grandmothers, aunties, that kind of energy. At least I'm not. So those conversations just aren't something that I'm used to having amongst other women that aren't like family, or just it's just usually out of comfort. It's not always like an easily accessible resource. So I wanted to create a resource. So yes. So the first one was just cramps. Some of these are physical and some of these are not. But the first one was cramps. I'm actually starting to feel headaches. So headaches too. But the physical, I think, is a sign also of the mental and the emotional and the psychic, the spiritual. Along with cramps, I said sleepless nights. And I said, for me, I've noticed a real shift in my sleep recently. Like the other night, I didn't sleep at all. Like I slept 3 hours. And then tonight, I slept a lot, but I was waking up every hour because I was having so many dreams. And then I've also experienced a real lack of dreams. So I feel like there's a lot of shifting in your psychic energy and like your dream state and your sleep when your period is about to come. And it's probably because your body is beginning to just process and go through everything. And it's kind of, I feel like a mix of being in overdrive, but also like when you're gathering up all the final information before you do a clean sweep. There's just a lot going on. So during that time, I think that there's a lot of shifts in your sleep. You might struggle to sleep, you might be sleeping a lot more, you could feel more tired, you might have a lot of dreams, or you could have no dreams at all. But there's just change in that experience. I said acne, and there's a lot around the physical. I found that I really don't feel very beautiful before my period, and but I also have found that I end up having an appreciation for my beauty in the past. But in my current state, I don't feel very beautiful, and I really struggle with confidence. Like filming this video, it's really taking everything in me to not just stop and shut the video down and just give up. Because confidence isn't super high. And I think that that's just because there's this feeling of like hopelessness and a little bit of like, not maybe dread, but just kind of this feeling of what's the point, because there's this understanding that there's an ending coming, there's this death energy that's arriving, and so you just kind of feel like giving up. And it's not laziness, it's not lack of spirit or hope. I mean, it is a bit of lack of hope, but it's because it's actually more productive to not have a lot of hope in certain states, because you're saving your energy, because you understand that you're about to go through a process that is death, but also isn't a physical death in the sense that you won't have to work anymore. We still have to live through our periods, even though it's going to cost a lot of energy. So in the time before that, you might start to feel kind of heavy and not really wanting to complete things, and not really wanting to give a lot of energy to new things and really invest in life at all, because you just have this understanding that you have to save up because winter is coming, basically. So for me, it's like there's this lack of confidence in doing things that I know I want to do, but I just don't. Sometimes it's hard to, I see the point, but it's hard to muster up the energy for that point because I'm already feeling myself kind of drained and shutting down. And that's just a part of the process. And I think not making yourself feel bad about that is really important, and allowing yourself to feel that way and not judge it and not be like, well, I need to get it together, because you don't need to get it together. This is you having it together. You're functioning at your highest. You're functioning at your best. This is just what you can do right now. So yeah, I wrote down the need for more silence. It's just open space. I think that the silence really, 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 really helps prepare you for what's to come. It's similar to what I was just talking about with like the death energy, because death is kind of silent. It's very loud in other ways, but for a lot of it, it's also quiet. And I think it makes the incoming cycle that's about to begin easier to take on. You just are able to transition more smoothly. And there's just this sense of peace and calm. And when there's so much noise and so much clutter, everything just becomes overwhelming, and it can become difficult to understand things. I think you can easily get confused with so much noise, which also makes it hard right now for me to be filming this video, because I feel like I don't know what's happening because it's hard for me to balance like the weight of sound and like an active, loud presence in a space with this feeling of wanting to retreat. So I like don't want to hear my own voice, and I don't want to hear anything. I just want to sit there and just let whatever is coming come. And I feel like I can sense and understand things more clearly in the silence and speak more clearly in the silence. Like, I think telepathic energy is really strengthened at this time because it's just actually an easier way to communicate than the physical, and compared to vocal, it's just easier that way. I also think it's probably easier to like express yourself in other means beyond vocal means. So communicating just might be really hard um, during this time as well. I said healer abilities unlocked. And the reason I said that is because I've noticed not that I am more able to heal myself right now, but just I'm more aware of the healing gifts that I have. Like I struggle with eczema, and I realized I had gone through a big flare up this past month, and I realized just recently, like the past few days, that this routine I've been doing has really helped, and I haven't been using my steroid creams. So, and then I went to this Christmas market and I spoke with this woman about this salve that she has called Yarrow, and I got it. And I just started to begin to pick up on these little healing techniques that I have and this like knowledge that I have for being able to heal my own body, and begin to feed that energy more and acknowledge it more. So it's not that those abilities have unlocked, but it's just that I've become more aware of them, and I've become more aware of how self-sufficient I am when it comes to my health and taking care of myself, which has also taken form in me wanting to take care of myself a little bit more in smaller ways, like stretching or like putting my phone down, or like moving around, or closing my eyes. They're kind of small things, but they're things that I understand really do make a difference in my energy and in how I feel. And just a connection between energetic self care and the way that that links to your physical self care. Wanting to be cozy, just wanting to be warm and wanting to feel held and soft and just like really removed from anything cold and like arid, I want to say, and like just open space is nice, but also warm, soothing, closer spaces is nice. Intimacy is nice, but especially with yourself. Um, Delving into past creations and dreams of the future. I just found myself wanting to listen to a lot of the old music that I've made. Um, that's really been the main thing that I've noticed. And then this morning I was looking at a lot of my old photos and things like that. And then I've been fantasizing and dreaming a lot and wondering a lot about what I'm going to look like in the future. So I said there's an emphasis on your aesthetic dreams. Like I've been wondering whether I'm going to continue to cut my hair or if I'm going to grow it long. And kind of lots of big decisions around beauty and your physical beauty. And I was saying that you may have these realizations about the past, about your beauty in the past, about what you looked really good in, about what you really enjoyed yourself looking like. Like I was looking at old photos and I saw my 2 nose piercings, and I remembered that I really like having nose piercings and I really liked having double nose piercings. Um, and and I was looking at my hair and all the different phases of my hair, and I was remembering how beautiful I am, and not feeling that way right now, but knowing that I do have beauty and that there are different ways that that beauty can be activated, and kind of seeing beauty not so much as this thing of like you either have it or you don't, but as this thing that's cultivated and you work with, and it's more fluid. And so there's also a level of acceptance and detachment, I think, from the physical. And with that detachment, you can see yourself from a level head, a balanced place where you can look and see what works. You kind of understand what works for you beauty wise and aesthetic wise, what really lights you up, what dims your light. And I think you are able to be more clear about what you look good in and what makes you look good and what makes you feel good during this time, because it's not such an emotional, tumultuous experience that's, connected to self-love and confidence. It's just clear cut. you're just able to be honest and blunt with yourself and be like, this looks good, this doesn't. um, Wanting to stay inside, hermit energy, just not wanting to go out and not even wanting to be outside, but maybe still wanting to be connected to nature, just but not really wanting to be outside. Especially during if it's cold. If there's anything that's going to make you uncomfortable, I think it just becomes like ugh, and it becomes an easy no. There's not a lot of debating with yourself during this time when it comes to going out. It's like if there's one thing that's going to make it uncomfortable, you just kind of throw away the whole plan. And again, I think it has to do with just saving energy. I said inner child healing might become relevant during this time. Yeah. And I think that that's just because in this phase, it also represents that time in our life right before we got our periods for the first time. So there's this, and it's not that you are not a child anymore once you have your period, nothing like that. But there's obviously a difference just physically, even if you don't feel that different emotionally or anything like that. There's a difference physically. And there's this sense of loss, and it can be quite sudden. And it's not like it's something you can predict or really prepare for. I mean, you can prepare, but not really. So there is this cutoff from the inner child in these ways. And I think that during this time, you might, and this doesn't always have to be something that occurs every single time, but I've found that there's just things that come up with my inner child. And for me, this time around, linked to my next point, there's this rise in sexual energy, which includes triggers, disturbances, desires, all forms of sexual energy. So not just wanting to be sexually active or having a lot of desires, wanting to be passionate, not just that, but also triggers around sexuality, triggers around sexual expression. And I said that what I noticed this time around, which was linked to my inner child healing, was looking at the unhealthy aspects of what I consider unhealthy or shameful or guilt, or that I have a lot of guilt around when it comes to my sexual energy. Because I was one of those kids, and I don't know if every kid was one of those kids and then we just don't talk about it, or if it is just certain kids. But I was a kid that was very aware of sexual energy as a child, and it wasn't weird for me. It was just something I was aware of because it just, like I was aware because it felt good. And I just understood that if I touched myself certain places, I would feel good. So I was kind of introduced to that very quickly, obviously not with any conversation around it, and like talk to my parents about things like that. And I was already beginning to have a lot of thoughts around sexuality in terms of being attracted to who I'm attracted to, because I knew that I was attracted to girls very young. So there was a lot around that was coming up though, because I had this understanding of sexuality very young, and I grew up in the age of the internet, in the early internet. I also had access to sexuality on the web, which was not great because it was very unrestricted, and I was exposed to a lot of things that I feel like ended up creating a lot of difficulties and just like shame around sexual expression and what I desire. And just I found that right now there's a lot of undoing I have to do between, first of all, like undoing shame and guilt around what my body just physically reacts to, whether it's something I actually enjoy or not. Understanding that sometimes your body is still going to seem like it enjoys something or show signs of enjoying something, even if you don't, because as much as you are your body, there are separations and things just are what they are. You just react to certain things. So even if it seems like you're experiencing pleasure seeing certain things or thinking about certain things, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are. And there's a lot of like undoing of shame and guilt that I have to do around that. And I found that it's coming up a lot now recently, like during this time, because like a couple weeks ago, I was having a different experience with my sexuality where I was feeling really sexually empowered, but it was super healthy. And I was practicing being able to practice self pleasure without having to view anything and just being able to do that from my own mind and trying to do it also from a sacred space where I'm connecting with like a higher feminine energy just to kind of take care of me and protect me during that time, because I think that I've felt very isolated and unprotected, especially as a girl and as a woman in my sexual expression. And I think that we often are taught that sexuality and sexual experiences are something that you kind of have to go through on your own. Like you just have to deal with it on your own, and it's been separated from like spirituality and from safety. And so it feels weird to want to be protected and like for me, like speaking in terms that make sense to me, like it would feel weird for me to ask to be like held by like the goddess while I'm practicing pleasure, because there's like this shame around the experience altogether. So it's something that I should just be doing, you know, hidden away from the world. But so a couple weeks ago, I was experiencing a more happy, more empowered state of sexuality where I was beginning to practice sexual exploration and expression in that way. But today, I've been dealing with it in a difficult way where I'm still experiencing like a rush of desires and want for sexual connection, but I can see like the aspects that are not as healthy in terms of what I desire or what seems like a desire to me, what I feel compelled to look at and compelled to kick off and pick up this energy. So there's a lot of like confronting around that, a lot of like healing that has to be done around that aspect of sexual energy I've found during this time. And I don't know if it alternates because, like I said, this is just something, these are just things I was thinking about today. So I don't know if they alternate. I've also been really emotional. Super emotional. I was watching, what's it called? Red? The Pixar movie, Red, Chasing Red, the movie with the panda bear. A really, really good one. It's such a good movie. And there was this time, oh yeah, she was reacting because her mom took her notebook and she like showed it to everybody in the gas station store. And like the little girl's reaction to that, like I almost like felt like I was her and I could feel it. And I literally like almost cried, like just instantly. I don't know. I've never really had, maybe I have, but I don't remember having experienced an experience like that before. It was so strong that I shocked myself because I was like, what the heck? But anyways, yeah, like I obviously was not expecting to cry just now, so that's something. But yeah, emotional, very emotional during this time, and just yeah, trying, there's lots of like guilt and shame, I think, to work through. And I think it's just a lot of shadow work and things coming to the surface because, again, you're right before the death state. So everything that needs to come out has to come out because you're about to transition. So nothing gets left behind, which is really hard because if you allow it, obviously you can suppress things, you can push it down. But if you're in a place where you're trying to allow yourself to flow, then this part of the flow can be really triggering and like traumatic and just really difficult. And yeah, it can just be really hard during this time. So I would just be really, really, really gentle with yourself, because it can just be overwhelming and linked again to the inner child. Just, I think, during this time. I think also because you're becoming closer again to that childlike state. You're beginning to like understand the complexities of awareness as a child, because as we all know, and as we're having more conversations about this today, children are a lot more aware of the world and their experiences and other people's experiences, and the complexities of like reactions and actions than we give them credit for. They're a lot more aware than we give them credit for. But also, awareness does not actually mean knowing. Knowing and understanding are very different from awareness. And just because you are aware of something does not mean you really understand it. And so, and that's the thing with like, and I was going to say that's the thing with like the psychic dreams also that might come up a lot during this time. And I think also just like a lot of psychic activation is that your mind will show you things and your body might make you feel things that could make you believe something has happened to you that hasn't, because it's just trying to show you the core of an experience that you hold within you, the core feeling of an experience that you hold within you. So I was shown something really scary around like sexual energy and children, and it scared me, and I began to like spiral and feel like and wonder if something had happened to me as a child. And this is the really important thing about being connected to something, I think. Sorry. I think that, especially, I think that especially as a woman or just as a human being, I think one of the reasons why it's really pivotal to your health that you are connected to something outside of yourself, and that you have some type of spiritual connection. It doesn't need to be God or a goddess. It doesn't need to be anything. You don't need to have a name for it. But one of the reasons I think that like atheism just doesn't work for humans is because there's a lot of trauma that we have that our minds don't hold on to. So we don't have memories of them that we can pull and reference and be able to validate, this thing that we're feeling. And so you can feel really crazy and you can begin to make up stories about what's happened to you because you don't know where all these feelings are coming from. And if you don't have something to speak to, if you don't have something to speak to, even if it's just yourself, because you can separate, I believe that you can separate yourself and you can begin to speak to the many spectrums of yourself. And if you don't connect to anything outside of yourself, you have to be connected to your own self. And we have different levels of understanding. And you can speak to yourself at the highest level of understanding and get some context and information around why you're experiencing these things to give more clarity. Because if you try to solve it all on your own, and even sometimes trying to solve it through other people, it doesn't help, because it's something that people can't really help you with. It's something that's beyond life. It's connected to a different type of energy source. And it's information that people don't have. It's information that something else has. If you understand what I'm saying, I'm not saying anything around you need to have in certain beliefs or anything like that. I think it would bring a lot of us relief if we could talk to something else beyond us. Anyways, why was I saying that? Yeah, I was saying that because I had started to spiral and have fears that something had happened to me as a child. And when I asked for help because I was scared, I just realized I realized that no, nothing happened. It's just that my relationship with self-pleasure was tainted by like porn and by what sex and pleasure was represented as online that I saw at a really young age, that was really like abusive to my spirit as a child, really violating to my spirit as a child. And so it's a different form of abuse that's really hard to like diagnose and heal, because first of all, there's nothing to look towards beyond the internet, to be like, this is the source, and the internet is such a complicated place, and the porn industry is such a complicated industry, and there's just a lot of shame and guilt, and there's a lot of energy there, right? And you see the things, and then you know that those are real people, but there's this level of detachment, and especially connecting as a woman. I mean, back then I was a little girl, but connecting with the women that I was seeing, it was just a lot. So all of that was coming up just this morning, and it's all connected. And I think it's all coming up because it needs to come up, because it needs to come out, right now. And I think that just purely on a biological or like a survival based perspective, it's because you can't be carrying all these things if you're beginning to prepare yourself for the potential of carrying life within you. You can't have all of this stuck within you. It's too much. Like pregnancy and birth and being a mother is hard enough. It's dangerous enough. It's life-threatening enough. So having all these things that threaten your spirit, because there's things that you need to heal, and there's triggers, and there's just all these things, especially around the inner child, it's too much to just let sit there. It can really hurt you. So your body brings it up now because it's time to get rid of it. And it waited for the harder things, they wait as long as they can, but then you have to get it out. And so if you're someone who is going through this kind of like really emotional experience and you're struggling to just let it happen, I completely understand. But I really encourage you to just let yourself experience what you're experiencing and just let yourself let it go, because you need to, and ultimately it will really heal you in the long run. It's not to say it's going to be easy, and I don't think that it necessarily leads to like profound clarity, because usually when it comes to shadow work and healing, it's just a matter of remembering things that we already know, um, is what I found so far. It's a matter of just remembering things that I already know, but I forgot, or I pushed away, or I didn't understand, you know? I was aware of it, but I didn't understand it. So, yeah. So, the other things I wrote down are you may feel combative and confused, defensive. I've felt mostly really confused, really cloudy and just confused. And my confusion often leads me to being upset because I'm like, what's happening? Like, I'll feel really confused about my life plan, like what I'm supposed to do with my life, and confused about my dreams, and confused about my relationships in my life and my sense of self. And I think this confusion comes from, again, this death energy that's coming, because ultimately there's a lot that is going to be let go. I think if you're living life this way in this lifetime where you're having periods, then I think your life plan shifts a lot, because you're always being confronted with death, and you're always being confronted with transformation. So the plans are always changing. And that ends up meaning that oftentimes every single month for like 40 years, you can be really confused. Not 40 years, maybe like 30 years. I don't know. You can be really confused and feel like you have no idea what's going on in your life anymore, because things are changing and the plans are changing, and nothing is clear anymore because nothing's really there anymore. Everything is lining up to go out, to get out of your system. So you kind of always have to be ready to detach. But that can be really frustrating, and so I think that there's a lot of confusion that comes up, and you might be angry. And I get into I just get really angry and pissed off and frustrated with my spirit team, with myself, with the world, with anything. Yeah, I said stretching. You may feel the need to take care of your body more, to become more fluid, to be able to move more easily, because stretching and moving really easily, being more fluid, also helps your body get the blood out, helps it all run, helps you get the toxins out. So, yeah. You might feel more connected to the earth, and the earth might become a messenger for you. So, you might be able to like have revelations by looking at a tree, or in your dreams you might have a lot of animals begin coming to you, and just showing up in your dream and representing different things. But you might just have like a lot of more earth-based psychic experiences in the earth element, because again, you're becoming rooted. Your root chakra is really prominent at this time. Your lower chakras are really prominent at this time. You may want information so that you can self-direct healing and be an informed decision maker. So I feel like during this time, it's the hermit energy, which is also a lot of research-based energy. So you may be looking a lot up and studying and like Googling and just trying to get information, but you may not necessarily want to be taught things. I think you might want to be the teacher more so, like kind of like Sagittarius energy, where you're not interested in being a student, but you are interested in having access to information. It's kind of like wanting to go to the library. and because you are a historian or you are a teacher who needs to have access to this information so that you can share this with yourself or help yourself through certain things. I think that there's this level of like entitlement to information that's activated without shame. And I think that comes from the crone as well, understanding that you have the right to have access to information without having to be a student, without having to come like begging on your knees, like help me. Just kind of taking information in and then being like, I don't need the teaching, I just need this information so I can teach myself or so I can self-direct this healing, because there's also this independent energy of like, I need to do this on my own. Just give me the information and let me go. Kind of like that. So also you might be like really into like alternative forms of healing and medicine at this time and like self-directed things like that. Like I've found myself needing to stretch, but like I don't want to watch YouTube videos of stretching. I want to just do it on my own, you know? But then I realize, but then I will take information like this article that was like, test how flexible you are. Like I'll read that and I'll do the different tests, but I don't want to be taught, if that makes sense. It's kind of weird. I don't know if that's yeah, again, these are just my experiences, and I've thought about these all in connection to the fact that I know my period is coming, so I wrote them down. But you don't have to also experience these things for it to be, you know, you don't have to experience that. You might start thinking about failures, plans that haven't come to fruition, manifestations that haven't come to fruition. This could trigger resentment, depression, letting go, confusion. Yeah, you just might start to think about all the things you haven't done. Just like at the end of your life, when you're like, oh fuck, I didn't do this, and that. You know, you might just start to look at all the things that haven't been completed, that haven't been finished. And you can look at them from different perspectives. You might look at things and be like, oh well, I'm not gonna do this thing. Like I don't want to do this thing, so it is what it is. Or you might look at it and you could feel a lot of shame and guilt for not having gotten it done yet. You could feel angry about why certain things have not been completed yet, especially if it's not within your control, and that can trigger a lot of that combative energy and like hostile energy. It could empower you to want to make plans. It could also again make you feel hopeless, because it's like, I don't have the energy to make plans, but this is something that I want to get done. So then you could really spiral in that way. And again, we have to remember that all of this is temporary to a certain extent. Obviously, this energy comes back around pretty much every month, so it's not temporary in that way, but it is temporary, and it's fluid energy. It's not going to be the same symptoms every single time. So you need to let yourself feel it. If you feel depressed and hopeless because you haven't done this thing yet and it makes you feel like shit about yourself, just let yourself feel like shit. Let yourself feel like shit about yourself and just go with it, because ultimately you're not going to feel that way forever, and you probably need to feel that way. You probably need to feel really bad. You probably need to feel like shit, because you're going to remember these feelings. It's not like you just like you like enter a different state of consciousness during the weeks before your period and then you'll forget about it once your period comes. You'll remember everything. So it might become something that triggers you into movement once you have the energy to move. But for now, let the energy be felt. And that way it can be let go. Because what you don't want is to push it down, which is always what you're doing when you're not feeling something. You're always just pushing it down, no matter what you tell yourself. We cannot rise above certain emotions. If it's an emotion that's coming up, it's because it's an emotion that's there. Emotions don't just create themselves as illusions and it's not actually there. It's there. If you feel something, it's because you're feeling it. You know, you can't make up a feeling. So let yourself feel that, because if you don't, you're suppressing it. And if you suppress it, you're just building up junk that you're going to have to let go of eventually. And if you don't let yourself let go of it then, and you wait a long time, you might be crying like I was just crying, and it could be a lot more intense. than that. And that felt intense for me, and I was trying to speak through that. So, yeah, just let yourself feel it. And just try not to judge yourself. You're really like surviving a war zone in this time period. Like you're dying. So just let yourself really like be compassionate as you can. And if your form of being compassionate is you actually kind of being like depressed and mean to yourself, you might just kind of need to let it happen, because it's showing yourself something about the way that you treat yourself during times where you feel unsafe, or you feel sad, or you feel triggered. It's showing yourself that your gut reaction to you feeling unsafe or insecure is to bully yourself. And that's something you need to know about yourself, so it's something that you can address later on. And if you let yourself feel that in the moment, then as you're feeling it, you can be asking yourself questions. You can do the shadow work, you can purge, because this is what I was talking about when I said that you can split yourself up. There's a part of yourself that is going to feel all of that. Let that part of yourself feel all of that, because you can handle it. Trust me, you can handle it. Then split yourself up and let another part of yourself begin to talk to that version of yourself and ask what's going on, and ask questions about why this is the reaction that you have, and not from a judgmental place, but like, what is going on? Where does this come from? You need to kind of be your own therapist, but not in a therapizing way, in a way that's like the way you wish your mother would have mothered you. You know, you have to mother yourself, and that's the perfect time to. Delayed thinking, space brain. You just might forget things. You might not be able to think. You might be speaking, but it feels like gibberish, or it sounds like gibberish. You also might have a disconnection between your perspective and reality. So I could be speaking and be speaking quite well and be quite eloquent, but I could think that I sound like gibberish and like sound super uneducated and unintelligent. And it could not be true at all, but I might think that I sound that way. So if you have things that you have to get done during this time, but you feel like shit as you're doing these things, and like you feel like everything is really bad, try to ignore that. Try to ignore yourself in that way. Not suppress those feelings. Let yourself feel that. Like through this whole video, I've felt like I was like shit the entire time. And I felt like I'm stuttering too much, and like I'm not making sense, and like I'm rambling. But I'm not stopping, because I want to get this done. And I know ultimately that I'm not. It's just my brain being like, because of all these things. Not just my period, but this happens all the time. But yeah, so just let it happen. But don't stop doing the things, you know what I mean? You may want to explore magic, witchcraft, hoodoo, any esoteric practice during this time. There also might be past life healing around your life as an esoteric practitioner. So this is obviously very specific to if you're interested in these types of things. But even if you're not, you might just find yourself dibbling and dabbling into it. And the only reason I say that is because, again, we're closer to death energy, we're closer to darkness, we're closer to our darker states, which is where magic is held which is where a lot of this kind of tangible magic that helps you get through situations is held within. And so you just might find yourself wanting to explore that or understand that a little bit more, and it might actually lead to breakthroughs. So there's also a lot of need to not judge yourself when it comes to that too, because there's this thing right now around, oh yeah, I don't want to do things just because it's a trend or blah, 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 blah. But we kind of live our life in trends and in cycles, just in terms of being alive. You go through cycles, and if you're someone who has a period, you go through cycles really, really often. So there could be this part of the month that's a cycle for you where you just tend to become more interested in the esoteric. Doesn't mean that you're fake and that you're not really into these things and it's not real. It's just something that becomes awakened during this time. And if it doesn't stay interesting to you for the rest of the time, that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that you've done something wrong or that you're not allowed to do this thing. Magic belongs to everybody. Spirituality belongs to everybody. If you are only interested in quote unquote spirituality, because I believe that everything is spiritual, even the things that we consider not spiritual at all. I don't think that there is an end or a beginning to spirituality. I think that spirituality is existence. Spirituality just is, like everything is spiritual. But the things that we consider quote unquote spiritual and esoteric, if it is only interesting to you during a very specific time in your life, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to do that. Nobody's allowed to police your experience around these things, and you're allowed. You're allowed. It belongs to you. It's your personal experience. Lots of reminiscing. Yeah, you just might be really reminiscing on the past. And again, it's because you're taking in everything and you're going through. So, for one, I found you might want to get rid of a lot of stuff. Could be a lot of decluttering, trying preparations for how you can live like a more clear life in the future. Like you might be watching a lot of like videos on like minimalism or just like organization or just living a life with more intention, things like that, like prepping for your next life, pretty much. But also reminiscing on the past. And it could be really positive. It doesn't need to be negative. It could be just really positive reminiscing. Like I said, there's a lot of reminiscing on old beauty, on how beautiful you looked in the past and what made you feel beautiful and what you looked beautiful in. And it's really physical with the beauty. Like there's the, oh, I feel beautiful, but there's also the physical beauty. You have a very keen and intuitive awareness around what you actually look good in, what really looks good on you. You really begin to understand that during this time. And I would really pay attention to that, because if you do, then you can actually like begin to figure out what your look is. Like we've all got something, and your look doesn't need to be stagnant. It shouldn't be. There's nothing wrong if it is, but like the point just being that we all have something, and if you pay attention to this time and don't see it as a critical thing or as a bad thing to care about beauty or to feel like you were more beautiful in the past than you are now, and you stop putting that pressure on beauty and you just understand that it's a thing that you can take on and take off and it doesn't need to matter so much, then it can become fun and you can be like, oh shit, I actually really liked the way I looked there. That looked really good. Okay, maybe I want to do that again. You know, like I'm really highly considering getting 2 nose piercings. And it could be spontaneous and you might feel crazy. Oh, that was another thing on the list. That's right after the lots of reminiscing. Spontaneous, sudden action that's coming from intuition rather than real world circumstances. So again, you just might feel compelled to do something, and you might not be able to really, you can probably rationalize it, but it might not feel super justified, but you might want to do it anyways. And I think you probably should, because like I said, you're very wise at this time. You've got a lot of information and understanding during this time because you're in the crone phase. It's right before death again. So you just know a lot, and what you know is valuable information. So acting on your knowing is very important. And I think that if you do, especially when it comes to beauty, you'll actually be quite happy. Old women have so much wisdom when it comes to beauty. They have so many tricks when it comes to beauty because they've lived a whole life and they can tell you what works and what doesn't. And especially for themselves, especially if they've been women who have been lucky enough to really get to explore their own beauty and their relationship with themselves, because so many women did not get to. But the women who have, we all see, because we tend to really be drawn towards them. And especially on social media, I think people have noticed like a rise in wanting to watch older women on social media, because it's really inspiring when you see a confident older woman who has her own personal sense of style, because it really is her own specific sense of style. It's so niche, it's so cultivated, and it's so individual. It does not feel like it is from anything other than her. And that is something that's a gift that comes with time. And these moments in your life, this crone energy that you're in right now before your period, the PMS time, is when you begin to really understand those nuggets of wisdom. And if you take note, you can begin to cultivate that energy so that one day when you're an older woman, or older person, you have got that sense of self, that sense of style, that beauty that makes you feel amazing because you listened to yourself every time you were like, oh, that's what I look good in, without judgment. Okay, multiple redirections. You might just be all over the place. You might want to pursue this, and then in 2 days you want to pursue this, and in 3 days you want to pursue that, and in 4 days you want to pursue this. Multiple redirections. You might need to go here, and then you're like, oh shit, I need to go here, and then oh shit, I actually need to go here. Just confusion. And nothing is nothing is certain. Everything's kind of shifting and changing. Root chakra and third eye activations. Your root chakra and your third eye are just really important and powerful during this time. They're coming up a lot. They could be the triggers. They could be like gifts are coming up. You might just want to move these things. You might have pain around these things. They're just important chakras during this time. And I said that the sacral chakra and the solar plexus chakra. So I think that you find your power place actually more so within the root chakra and the third eye chakra during this time. And your sensitive places might be in the solar plexus and the sacral chakra during this time, because it has to do with confidence and sexuality again. Alone time is important. And then finally, time with women, and specifically time with women that is intentional, time with women that talks about women's experiences, time with people that talk about the feminine experience. During this time, you could feel a real rise in your feminism. You could feel a real rise in your political and social awareness and activism when it comes to women's issues, when it comes to feminine energy, you might feel activated by your experience within the feminine, as a woman. And if you're not a woman, but you have a period, just within the energy that affects the body that you live in. You might have a lot of activation around wanting to talk about that, wanting to advocate for that, wanting to speak to that, and wanting to be in community with other people who understand that experience. You just might become a lot more politically and socially engaged in that way. You might have a lot more opinions that you want to share and voice, or you might not want to share them, but you just might have a lot more strong opinions that are valid, and that are really grounded in something real. And there might be a real desire to talk about that, to share that, and to kind of activate this sense of advocacy within other women. So yeah, just like a real spike in feminism during this time in your life, I think, is a thing as well. So that was my whole list. I just went through it all. Thank you for being with me through all of the variations of my emotions during that time and during this time. And shout out to the people of the world with periods, and shout out to women in general. Shout out to feminine energy in general. It's a complicated way to live, and it's something that I wouldn't trade for the world. I would not want to be anything other than a woman. I really, really love being a woman. And beyond being a woman, I really love this body that I'm in, despite the times where I hate it. I ultimately really love this experience, and I think it's a precious experience. I think it's incredibly valuable. And I mean, of course, it's incredibly valuable, but not just because of the basic things that we understand, but because there's something special that's almost unexplainable. And I think that as people with this experience, we deserve to have more spaces where we can talk about, the complexities of our experience here and what we deal with. And I think there's so much value in us sharing our lives and how we're feeling. And if you're not someone who has a period, but you're just here listening, I also really appreciate you for that, because we need to create a world where we're all more informed on the experiences of these kinds of people, because there's so many of them, so many of us here, and the way that we live and feel and experience the world really affects everyone else. So if you have an understanding of that experience, even just a little bit of an understanding through listening to our experiences, then you can move with more intention in your own life. You can be more compassionate to others, and you can be more compassionate to yourself as well if you might be dealing with the combative version of us, or whatever. So just the more information in this case, the better. So thanks for listening, and yeah, I hope you share your experiences. If you have something to share your experiences, please. What you notice as signs and symptoms. I think the most basic ones that I had that I think a lot of us know about are the cramps, the acne, and just the emotional stuff. But a lot of the other things were just, yeah. Also, maybe feeling like breathless, and just feeling like winded and like over it all the time. Oh, but I think that's connected to the hopelessness. So, anyways, that's all. Enjoy, and you might feel a need to be more protective, and you might feel like you need to be protected, and you just might need to protect yourself. You might feel like you want to protect yourself physically, psychically, energetically, emotionally, I don't know, mentally. All these ways you just might want to protect yourself during this time. And it's not necessarily because you're in danger, but you just might feel like you want to be protected. And that's totally valid. You don't need a reason to want to be protected. And that's something that you might confront during this time too. Shame around feeling, having a desire to be protected, because there's nothing to be shameful of, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. So that is it. I'm done now. I was going to say good night, but goodbye.